I was asking for irrelevance, and what do I get? Relevance. You guys are... You must have got up really much earlier than me. Oh, you're going to... Okay, so we'll reserve one for you. But now it's Ricardo with relevance. Yes.
So, yesterday I chose to do, during the criticism exercise, to focus on my self-critic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really neat experience. And that once I ran the film strip, that my self-critic has been running.
Mm-hmm. So describe this self-critic so that the group really has an understanding of it, because I think we all have one of those. Right?
Well, for the most part, it's a very negative
This is sort of the...
talk. I mean, just
Right.
just sitting there constantly, well, you can't do this. Constant worry, constant tearing down of dreams. Just, you don't have
Right.
the skill. How are you going to get that done? You can't do it. You're dumb. You're stupid.
Right.
I mean, just really negative stuff. So I made the film, and then I made my film. Wrong. And you have some valid points, but for the most part, you're wrong.
Right.
And, you know, I do have the capability to learn and be compassionate, and I'm not dumb. I think I'm going to have to run it several times to really...
To educate that part.
To educate that part. But I feel more relaxed now. I feel more open.
Right. It's great to have choices in there.
Yeah.
So you understand what he's saying. We all have periodically an internal critic. It's our own voice. You know, oh, you screwed up again. Why'd you do that? Da, 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 you know, that runs. And sometimes it can be really oppressive when it gets out of control. So it's not as if there's somebody out there, another person that's criticizing us. It's inside, and we're criticizing ourselves, right? And what Ricardo's saying is that, wait a minute, I got a strategy. I'm going to deal with this aspect of myself, see it over there, kind of dissociate, and run it through this pattern. That's a really generative thing to do.
I'm thinking I kind of like to teach it
Yeah,
something else.
exactly. And this is exactly how, right? You begin to educate it in giving you high-quality, relevant feedback, right? I mean, see, an internal critic is not necessarily a bad thing, because it can be a really useful guide, but many of us learned how to have an internal critic in our earlier days by modeling other criticism we experienced in the world, which was often mom saying, well, you put your shoes up, you know, or whatever it is. You promised to take out the trash. So you get this kind of voice tone, et cetera, associated with not such good feelings. And over the years, you know, you want to give yourself feedback, and if that's your only model, and for many of us it was, things like that, parents do the best they can, but so we internalize that, and suddenly, not suddenly, over time, it's our own voice, and it's maybe attempting a positive intent to give us some useful feedback, but it turns out not to be so useful unless we update its map from 1928 to the current day. Judy, you had a hand up?
Well, I'm not stretching, but I do have a comment. I don't know what anybody else is in this place. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm doing fine, but yes, you know, I guess yesterday after all the emotional thing, and then it's kind of tapering down, and I'm finding myself getting in the critical place of saying, oh my God, you're never going to get on top of this material before you leave. Oh my God. And then I can pull back and I can go, wait a minute, you're the tortoise, not the hare. You know that about yourself. With practice and processing, you will get on top of this. You weren't the Olympic skier the first day you were put on skis. It's all process. And I can relieve the pressure that way. But physically, I'm feeling like, well, a little bit zombie-like. And I don't know whether anybody else in here is feeling that way or not.
Do you have any other takers on that kind of thing? Yeah. It's kind of like your head's so full of NLP, you're walking like this, and you don't want it to kind of pour out sloshing around. Very carefully, man. You know, I've got about this much room today. I can put one more little piece. Well, it may be time to change our plan for today and do something else, because I had
Can I share something with her?
Sure.
I was so overstimulated with NLP, I could not sleep. I finally decided to put everything under a blanket, but they would come out from different corners. And then I and then I said, no, you have to go in a box, and I was like, no. And I talked to everything, and I slept. But the next day I told Matt, and he told me something interesting to me. He said, did you open the lock? Oh, that's a good idea.
There's an old Zen saying I like when I get into that state, which I get into periodically myself. And the saying goes, if you want to control your sheep and goats, give them a very large meadow to play in. Right? And sometimes, this thing of understanding is kind of like a corral. It's kind of like a fence. You fence in knowledge or understanding with boundaries. Okay, do I understand it is the boundary, right? And stuff keeps coming at you. More goats, more sheep. So you keep putting them in, and pretty soon everything's in there getting kind of crowded. So if you really want to control them, you do it through giving them plenty of room to play, right? Expanding the...
Which is, you're not going to get it all
right
now. You've got 2 more weeks.
Right.
You will be getting more material, but you have an entire year to practice this.
Exactly.
It's not going to be perfect.
Yes, I've been doing this 20 years. And this morning with my coffee on the back deck, I'm reading through the handouts, the manual, tuning up the conscious mind. So I think it's an appropriate thing. And you'll notice that in the course of the training, it's kind of like there are these plateaus that sometimes you're in a really excellent learning state, wonderfully resourceful. Whatever it is you're learning is just making complete sense, and it's just great. A couple of days, and then it's like, wow, you're making links and coordinating all this information and integrating. It's like it's getting a little heavy, and then you reach a kind of a plateau. It's kind of a crescendo, and then the thing expands again. So,
Then the self-critic is in there.
right.
At some point, going, why can't you get on top of this material? Why didn't you do this 15 years ago? Your brain's slowed down, and then the competitiveness kicks in, and then I have to go, whoa, it's just about here, and ignore all the other stuff. That's what
Right.
you're doing for yourself.
Right.
But there is that critic that comes in there that you have to box off and decide. I wonder if everybody else is getting this a lot faster.
Time for group mind.
I think when we do some modalities, you'll be able to change that critic to sound like Mickey Mouse.
I got Mickey Mouse in there. That's like, silly fool, what are you doing? Minnie knows better than you do, come on. What's the experience of some others? Who's feeling like really energized and great, ready to learn? Yeah, you are. That's great. It's about half and half. Okay. Those energized folks get together with the other guys, for about an hour, come back, and we'll... Joe.
I have a question about your discussion with Ricardo. We touched on it briefly on the deck yesterday when you were mentioning about that you were going to bring this up this morning.
Sure.
And to me, splitting the inner voice, particularly the critical inner voice, is a challenge. It's three. Bless you. God bless you.
It was a nice split.
Yeah. Right. Oh, it's done. But anyhow, just kind of like, as I said, gee, how do you do that without sort of becoming a schizoid? One voice talking to the other, like Gollum or something.
Oh, not that you are. Not that you are.
So, just, methodology, I guess.
I'm curious.
I feel I do it all the time anyway. You talk to yourself. You did something stupid. Well, no, I didn't. I was trying really hard. Well, and then something negative comes in. It's almost like two sides of you are there anyway. And you just kind of, bringing both of them to kind of like a negotiation table. kind of just see each other's sides and be respectful of each other.
What did it look like, Ricardo, when you did that? I mean, did you have two people, one Ricardo and another Ricardo?
It was hard to visualize the negative me, but I just sensed it there, and images were coming out. So it wasn't so much as visualizing myself, but just an entity.
Yeah, because that's what I was
Yeah.
expecting to have some difficulty with. When you first described this yesterday, actually made this go back to Cheryl's thing a little bit. My irrelevant question from earlier was going to be about fourth position, and I hadn't heard that before, and I kind of was wondering if that was like part of the crowd or something.
Part of the crowd.
Well, you're so far away that you're almost part of the crowd that's watching what's going on. Or how do you describe? Did I miss a description?
No, actually, there was a term that I think Cheryl used here that I haven't really presented. This may help clarify that question. Dissociation, the way we've kind of explored it so far, we've expressed it as kind of an either-or. You either are dissociated, right, or you're not dissociated. But the way you actually experience it internally is more like a spectrum. It's a kind of a relative thing. You can be more or less dissociated, right? You can be sort of dissociated. For example, if you think of a pleasant experience, something nice that happened from first position, you're seeing the mountains out of your own eyes and the birds or whatever, and you're right back in it, you're in first position. And if you start kind of at the edges of your visual awareness and you put a great big frame around it, it changes the feeling just a little bit, right? And if you kind of begin to narrow that so that it becomes like a window, you're still kind of in first position, you're seeing out of your own eyes, but if that's the way you're structuring it in your visual field internally, there's a sense of not being completely in it, right? Right. If you have a visual representation literally of yourself over there, then there is this kind of, right? But then, this sort of understood principle that third position distances you from feelings. If you have an opinion or a feeling about whatever's going on over there, you can dissociate even more, right?
Well, it's leapfrogging the third position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a basically I consider it a strategic use of third position, right? An example, again, kind of back to this phobia trauma procedure. When you do that, the implication is that any phobic or traumatic event is so emotionally laden that it's very difficult to stay out of the response, right? So when you do this, when you learn this pattern, you'll do a kind of a double dissociation. I'll give you just a preamble to this. The way that you begin to experience is that you imagine sitting in a movie theater looking up at a screen where the event takes place, right? Simple dissociation. But then you float out of your body in the theater seat and you go up to the projection booth, right? So it's a dissociated position, but it's a double dissociation. And it's kind of insurance against falling into or getting associated with that event, right?
So you put yourself far enough away from it, but you're still connected by observation.
Right. And the distance can really make a difference. It's like if you were to imagine an unpleasant experience dissociated with yourself over here, and you're about a foot away or 2 feet away, and it's happening, right? And it's a fiery one. There may still be, even though it's dissociation, some kind of charge or kind of a greater evaluation. But if you were to imagine them floating off into space, and suddenly down below you, you see the planet Earth, and you're down there in the North American continent somewhere having that event.
Isn't that like a farther away than fourth position?
Yeah. Yeah.
One other question regarding my cards thing I thought of is that objective-wise, is the objective potentially to silence the critical or merge the two so that you have a balanced voice that's not maybe skews the critical side?
Yeah.
Or what?
I think, I've been thinking about it a little bit. I just wanted to enjoy the experience first and just kind of feel more freedom right now, a sense of openness, of reception. And I experienced something last night with the presentation yesterday, but my goal now, I think, is just to teach that critical voice that it's okay to be there, have its opinion, but try to skew it more towards the positive side and be a supportive rather than a destroyer. It has the intent to help me.
More of a positive analysis or
Right.
an actual analysis as opposed to a
Made up,
slapping it around.
right. Yes.
Interesting.
To be supportive.
Thank you.
Another way to think of this, the strategy that Ricardo's talking about, you already know how to do. You learned it the first 3 days, and it's called the new behavior generator. What he's done is a slight modification of that. Right? I mean, this thing of dealing with parts isn't that exotic. So you're having an unpleasant thing, and you dissociate, you see yourself over there in the problem, choose a model, step back in. Right? Remember that from the first 3 days. That's the new behavior generator, works primarily with behavior. What Ricardo generated yesterday was a very similar pattern, but it was not so much a new behavior generator. It had more to do with internal computations. An aspect of self, right, internal, that he dissociated from, observed, and the way that this part was doing internal computations, in other words, thinking and responding, etc., making representations, evaluating them, wasn't working very well. Just like in the new behavior generator, the behaviors weren't working well. So, right, he tuned up, gave this aspect of himself a different capability, a different way of processing information, etc., until it was much more appropriate in alignment with who he wanted to be, stepped in, got the experience. Right?
Yes, yeah, it's just that's 20, 30 year, I don't know how many year process that you have tried to change, right?
And I feel that I need to do it several more times. Yesterday it felt good, just the initial, I can coexist. But now I want that, to blend it more. And I think that the negative part just needs more reinforcing to say, it's okay. Maybe it feels a little afraid that it's going to get shut down completely.
Sure.
But, just bring it along and just teach it new things.
So you're going to trick it a little bit, but you're
No,
not trying to.
I'm just, no.
Shut it.
Not trick it.
That's what I was curious about.
Yeah,
Because
just
you're
teach
trying
it.
to blend it in and
Yeah.
still
Have it there, because it's a part of me and it's an important part of me. And I am who I am today because of it.
So now the voice might
But I
say,
wanted to help me be someone else. No.
how are you going to get the skills instead of, you don't have the skills.
Right.
I say, well, how are we going to get the skills?
Or you may need different skills there.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
All right. It's a question of kind of integration of various parts of self and alignment.
it sounds like that you're changing the language and the approach is what your goal is, and I think it's a great idea.
To also, it's language, to experience the emotion that we've had is all based on language. So we're trying to tone down the emotions of this
Emotional reaction.
as well.
Well, yeah, and think about, all of us have aspects of ourselves that we just don't like. Do we not? Is there anyone in this room that's just totally suffused with self-love and acceptance? Because I'd like to meet it. Periodically. Judy. Don't we all periodically, according to our own standards or whatever, screw up? Whether it's internal or some behavior or whatever, and then we beat ourselves up a bit. Geez, I wish I hadn't done that. Da-da-da-da. So, part of what our evolution is about is acknowledging that, learning from that, right? Finding out what the intention of that part was. So the critical, self-critical part, as I was saying, that all of us have, behind every behavior is a positive intent, even the behavior of parts internally. A critical voice can have a very positive intent. It's simply the way that they're attempting to achieve it is not working. So this kind of tune-up and this way that Ricardo's developed his strategy is really intelligent. So it's kind of, I mean, when I see this going on in training, it really is gratifying because it's a mark of sort of learning NLP to learn NLP, or doing NLP to learn NLP, a real internalization of the pattern, right? And actually, it anticipates some of the things you'll get into next week with parts integration, where you deal with various aspects or parts of self, and how do you go about integrating those, and honoring their positive intention and like that. Other commentary about this? Everybody have at least an idea of how you might do this yourselves with an internal critical voice, right? Kind of modeled after the criticism strategy that we were exploring yesterday. Yeah. Okay. What else about the criticism strategy? We didn't really have time and opportunity to discuss it at length at the end of the day. Monet?
It's similar to what they were saying over here. I was able to dissociate from it, but then when I was comparing their movie with my movie, I had to examine the details. And examining the details started bringing feelings back.
Okay.
So I was there until I started looking at those details.
Right.
Because when it was kind of distant and fuzzy, it was hard to compare.
Right. So the details kind of brought you back into the thing? Okay. There were a couple little, techniques that might assist you in this that I think were written up in the notes. One is this metaphor of a plexiglass shield, right? And so you have this sense, it's visually there. You could also get kind of a kinesthetic of that dissociation by imagining reaching out and touching that plastic, kind of keep a kinesthetic, boundary to it, right? The strategy, who was I demonstrating that with? Was it Ricardo? Yeah, that's exactly right. Where he said he had like a plastic bubble over his father so that content, couldn't get out, kind of. That would be another strategy. Another one is to sharpen up the image so you get clarity, so it's no longer fuzzy, but it's at a distance. Sort of move it further away, so that you can maintain comfort of the thing. So you can use any kind of internal metaphor. The principle of this is that you want to be able to maintain a dissociated state while you compare the representations, whatever you need to do. You could imagine two video monitors side by side, right? Little ones in black and white, if you like, right? And those are all strategies that might be able to maintain that dissociation. Okay? Oliver.
Chris anchored a state of centeredness into me before he took me through the exercise. And when he saw me, it kind of surprised me. I started to feel a little irritated about the situation.
Right.
He fired off that anchor and brought me back to the center.
Great. Good move.
And it worked really well.
Similar. Yvonne, I thank you for that, because he really tuned in. And since it was self-critic, I was wanting to get emotionally involved a lot. I don't know how many times he fired it off, but that helped a lot to keep bringing me back.
Great. Good going. Other commentary or observations about this criticism strategy?
I actually kind of reversed it last night, and I found through the partners I was working with, I was running films of a different situation where I am critical of my husband, and I was comparing our films, and it just gave me an insight of how, I can change my behavior.
Interesting.
To
Right.
not be critical.
Nice. Wow. For that one.
I know that he is.
Also, be sure to pull up the actual plexiglass when you're actually integrating.
Right.
Because I didn't do it actually.
Bump it.
I was like, what?
So I can't get through. That's great. And then remove the plexiglass.
Position do you step out of? You remember like this, she went fourth position, you go to fifth, sixth, or just best fourth?
The point to keep in mind here is the outcome that you're attempting to achieve, right? So there's different ways to utilize this. Rather than, that kind of house of mirrors where, I'll disassociate from that and that and that. You keep in mind your outcome, and I think like a combination of dissociation and anchoring states is a much more useful approach. And when you're facilitating someone and they dissociate and it seems as if they're collapsing back in. One strategy is to have them step back one more position. That's an option. The other is to build up a resource state in this dissociated position. In other words, it's kind of a break state from whatever's happening. What kind of resourceful state would be useful for you to have? Imagine a time that you had it, really kind of elicit that state, and you anchor that, right? Because what they want to be in is a receptive, observant state with lots of options and resources available as they review this. So you can anchor in sort of a concomitant or a stance, a resource stance that they take in observer position, right? I think that combination of dissociation and anchoring some resource state in the dissociated position is the most useful way to go. Otherwise, it gets complex and confusing, and you're just, it's kind of a mind game, and it doesn't really benefit your outcome. Okay. Other commentary about the criticism strategy? Yeah.
Not so much more about the disassociation, that there must be certain professions, if you want to remain healthy, that you naturally have, like a surgeon or something, must have a very good disassociation strategy.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. This is the thing. I mean, I think a lot of professions, they may not explicitly teach it in that way in medical school, but I absolutely agree with you. Right? But if you review from the first weekend the attributes of each position, first, second, and third position, it's about 2 or 3 pages in your notes. Each position has a lot of benefits, but each one has a downside if you're stuck there. So, for example, a surgeon or someone, if they professionally train themselves to dissociate so completely, it can affect other areas of their life, where they become cold, distant, analytical, out of touch with things. I mean, you kind of wonder about things like suicide rates amongst medical professionals like doctors and dentists, and how is that related to their characteristic strategies, and just,
Or certain people that, can hurt others
right.
and not feel anything, and I wonder how much they, literally because they disassociated and they're
right.
not into that at all, that they're able to do so.
Absolutely. It becomes a fascinating thing once you learn these principles, because then it begins to, exactly what you're doing, generalize your thinking about other areas of life. Consider a soldier, right? Soldiers, hopefully less and less, but primarily in military training, what happens is the enemy, they're educated to perceive them as sort of really not human, not them, right? Really dissociated from, right? And that's a bizarre thing, because to your tourist duty, you come back home to your family in Sioux Falls or whatever it is, and that's been your orientation, so that reintegration with society can be a real shock. So you get, things like domestic violence, often with returning service personnel, and you think, rather than just kind of reading it in the papers, you begin to understand what's happening possibly for them subjectively, what their lives have really been like, and what kind of approaches you could take to help integrate them, right?
Do they use NLP in things like post-traumatic
Absolutely.
stress?
You bet.
And is considered really now a tool to
Yeah.
be able to
Yeah.
integrate them back
Well,
in?
my feeling is it certainly isn't as articulated as it could be in the therapeutic community, but yeah, I mean, a lot of practitioners that I know, counselors, myself included, have worked with PTSD situations, and it's great, because those things, unless they're dealt with effectively, can last a lifetime, affect a person's life. All right. I think what I'm going to do is the following. I want you to put your notebooks down and relax. And what I'd like to hear from the group, just to kind of load our circuitry, if you will, is I'd like to hear about some special places that you go to from time to time, or maybe not often enough, that you really love, because these places make you feel good, right? I'll sort of start by sharing a place that I know. In Hawaii, in Hana on Maui, there's a black sand beach, right? Beautiful, palm trees. It's the classic kind of shaped crescent beach. It's got black sand, and there are these big lava formations that look like dragons all around the bay. And there are places where you can kind of nestle in against the rocks with your feet in the sand and gaze off to the horizon where these waves just roll in. And there's a sense of timelessness there. And whenever I'm there, just everything kind of drains away. And it's a wonderful place to kind of relax and contemplate. And I know there are places that you have experienced like that too. I'd like to hear some of those. And as we share those, I'd like you to kind of just load your awareness with these different places, different kind of textures of environments that are open, relaxing, that where there's, they just have the capacity of kind of absorbing tension, and it drifts away and you're in a great state. So where do you go, Scott?
There's two places. One is Charlevoix, Michigan.
Summertime. And, right on Lake Michigan, sailing. Round Lake is right there, Lake Charlevoix. So it's just, perfect weather, light breeze, on the boat. And then the other is actually just north of here in Grand Lake. Going up to Grand Lake, as you know, Atlas Falls, or, out on the water.
Yeah. Water's nice, isn't it? Water is a great thing. It kind of moves things. So lakes and rivers. Where else?
There's this place that I've been to in Japan that's the natural hot springs. And it was amazing because it was snowing so hard at night. And these huge snowflakes were falling. But there's the red Japanese lanterns and you're in this natural rock hot spring lake with the snow coming down and very warm, just looking out. It's amazing.
Wow. So you're in the hot springs. There are these red glowing lanterns and these huge snowflakes falling from the sky at night.
Coming on your head and stuff, and you're still totally warm. The air is cold, but you can just sink down into the hot pool if you want.
That's nice. Wow. Yeah, Judy.
Well, it's interesting, Scott, you mentioned Charlevoix, Michigan, because one of my early experiences was in camp, and we had an afternoon where I went out into a field of daffodils, and you could lie down in the field of daffodils, and the ground was very warm, and the sun was shining, and you just sort of fell asleep in this bed of daffodils, and it was just the scent and the warmth of the earth and the sun coming down on you just.
That's beautiful. Sure.
Well, there's a beach up in the Portland area called Agate Beach, and if you get there at the right time in the evening to watch the sunset, there's these two huge rock formations to the left as you stand on the beach facing the west, and they're in the shape of lovers, nose to nose. So as the waves crash over those and the sun sets, it's an amazing thing.
There's Bahrain an island, so the sea all over, but there's certain point, and luckily enough, it is close to my house, so I just go walking. And really what I enjoy to go very early morning with sunrise. And there's a lot of bird, even immigrant bird, not like from Bahrain. And they just come in groups, and I'm sitting watching them as they are doing some, show or whatever. And the sun, when the sun rises, and the water in front of me, it is really very beautiful.
Wow. It's just like a flight of birds all around.
And the sunrise and the water, sound of the water. It is close to my house, so I just go very often actually, in every morning.
I have two places, and I don't go there, but I go there in my mind. One is the field at night when there was a little girl in a village high up on the mountains, and I lay down there in the grass and smell a smell of freshly cut wheat and look at the stars, and there are so many stars, there's almost no dark place, and something is always moving there. I just smell this, it's fresh, and I can lay down just all my body to the ground, to the grass, and breathe it.
It's one place. And another one I visited a year ago in Costa Rica, Tamarindo Beach. In the morning, it's just a feeling of tranquility, total connection from the sky to the earth. Just a place that they just been born, that it's my place. So I go there often too, on the stones.
Okay, I have another one. Right here in Winter Park, you can take the snowmobiles up to the highest peaks here, and it is so quiet. It's almost deafening. And beneath you are all the peaks of the other mountains, and the clouds are beneath you, and you're light years above the tree line. There are no trees. There's no vegetation. It's just you and snow. And when it starts to snow, you can hear it because it's so quiet. And it sounds like crystals hitting the ground. It's very sensory.
Well, we all have these places, and they live within us. And when we go there physically, we're very fortunate. And yet we don't even have to go there physically. We can allow ourselves in our mind to simply be there. And when we do, we feel differently. So I'd like you, wherever that place may be for you, I want you to just choose one of those places. By the river, the lake, looking at the stars, in the hot tub. And just let yourself relax there for a moment. And in that place, I'd like you to kind of look back a bit over the last couple of weeks. And it's an interesting thing to be able to do, to be in a place that's so special that there's an immense relaxation and just sort of a sense of connection with everything, and at the same time to review a really kind of challenging and different experience that you've been through in the last couple of weeks, and the experiences that you've had, and the intensity of the learning that you've been going through for the last couple of weeks. And as you get a sense of that rising up and the experience that you've had during the first 2 weeks of the practitioner training, I want you to maintain awareness of your surroundings, the look of the stars, the sound of the water, the sound of the snowflakes. And I want you to get back in touch with the real purpose, the real reason that you chose to have that learning manifest in your consciousness. The very first day that you were in the practitioner training, we took a morning and we shared why we were here, what drew us. It's important to maintain connection with that, because in many ways that's like this special place. Whatever that pull was that got you here, that's projected into the future too. Your being here had a reason, it has a reason, and it will have a reason. It's a thread of you through time. And it was the willing acceptance of a kind of challenge, and the enthusiasm that that challenge brought with it of new learning. And you knew also that there were changes that you would be going through. You didn't quite know what they'd be, and what they would be like, what you would learn about yourself and about others. And now you have a real sense of that. So I want you to allow that awareness of what it is exactly that you're exploring to rise up and link with the reason of the purpose that brought you here. We started off with some metaphors of sailing and Hawaiian canoes, and talked about learning navigation and then setting through the surf. And now you're almost out of sight of land. You're on the open ocean. And you're really getting a feel for what it is to sail, to trust your navigational skills, to deal with challenges, to learn what you know how to do to deal with the surprises that life and circumstance offers to you, so that the canoe itself is becoming more familiar. It's becoming more and more a part of who you are. As that self-discovery increases and you discover more and more about who you are and how you're put together, how you feel and how you think and how you behave, what the patterns are within you, how to accept those patterns, how to begin to change them. And again, much of this could have been surprising, something you didn't expect. And yet, that thread that brought you here, that is here now, and will persist into the future, is something that will carry a new you. A you that has developed another way of being in the world. In relationship to yourself, like we've explored this morning, dealing with what's going on inside you, the parts of you, the aspects of you, and your ability to interact and communicate and connect with other people. As that's enhanced, it's a transformation that you are going through that sometimes, since you're in it so intensely every day, it can be easy to lose sight of the forest because of the trees. You know, surprising trees may pop up in front of you and absorb all your attention. And yet, from time to time, just being in that special place that we were discussing a moment ago, amongst the snowflakes and the hot tubs and the black sand beach, wherever it is for you, just to be there and to remember the forest. And recognize that you're perceiving the forest in a new way. Seeing patterns. Seeing how that forest links to other forests. So just let that all kind of settle in. And as I was saying in response to what Judy was talking about the intensity that rises up from time to time, with these sheep and goats of learning, these new things that have come to your mind and your emotional state and your body, rather than trying to contain them within the boundaries of learning or full understanding, simply expand a bit. Give them a big meadow to play in. It's exactly what they should be doing now. So you can kind of relax the mind, relax the need to know and understand completely, to allow those sheep and goats of learning more room to interact, to play, to explore. So make those internal arrangements with yourself. Remember what brought you here. And remember that even in the most intense times, and there will be and there have been intense times in this room for you, even in the midst of the most intense times, that special place and everything it means is available to you at any moment. And your well-being and comfort and your being in a state of openness and receptivity to learning is the most important thing in this room. Even if it means that from time to time you need to step outside the room, look at the mountains, feel the wind, look at these beautiful flowers outside. Breathe deeply, expand the field for your sheep and goats. And relax that sort of tight clench on learning just a bit to allow the learning to simply take place. So have a sense of making those internal arrangements with yourself. Realize that it's Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday. For some of you, this means a great journey. For others, it means a weekend and 2 days off. There's always something to look forward to. And often, the thing that there is to look forward to is not outside you, it's within you. So just know that you have the capacity. As we were talking with Maya yesterday, energy flows where attention goes. Right? And you have the capacity to put your attention wherever you choose. So with that awareness, just allow yourself to kind of drift back into the room here. I think we'll take a 12-minute and 47-second break and then return. Okie dokie. As I was right before our exploration of the criticism strategy, I was saying that this was a strategy that Steve Andreas primarily modeled for people, or from people who had an effective way of dealing with criticism. Right? So it has a certain structure to it, and it produces a certain result. But the key word here I used was strategy. Right? And again, another way to think about NLP is it's the perception of patterns, maps of reality, structures and patterns, that you could also, another word you could use for these patterns are strategies. Right? And I was saying that for most of us, when we fall into unpleasant states or have unwanted responses, we get there by using a very specific strategy. Right? And the same is true of really useful states. And we use strategies in just about every aspect of our lives. All right? Think about getting up this morning. You got up this morning. That's a strategy in and of itself. Right? For some of us, it's a very lengthy strategy. Others bound out of bed and off they go. They're not in this room. Do you really? Up and ready to rock and roll? Wow, excellent. Yeah.
That's something that
Learn how to do it. How do we do that?
it's not even a motivation thing. It's just some people are just slow starters.
Right.
Is it possible? Yes.
To accelerate that process? Anything's possible. It's a question of putting it together in a way that works for you, right? And the way that you do that, there's a number of ways to do it. One of the most effective ways is to find someone who has that strategy and explore it, determine what it is, right? Model it. Let's actually play with this. So you're a slow starter, Monet, right?
His whole
His whole row. Right. This side of the room. Why don't and Cheryl, you're up and
Fully awake, fully alive, fully ready to go.
ready to rock and roll. All right.
Early morning?
Come on up here. Monet, let's see what we can discover here. I spilled a little water on that one, but it shouldn't be too damp. Sorry about it.
I stepped into this one.
You step right into this. Let me see. Yvonne, can I borrow that chair for a moment? I'm going to take this and spin it around here. Okay. So what we know to do is use sensory acuity to begin to detect pattern. And what we understand in terms of sort of a verbal contribution here is that they have different strategies for getting up in the morning. Right?
I guess, I don't know. Well,
Right. You get up in different ways, right? That's another way of saying it, actually. So, Cheryl, in the morning you get up and you're off and ready to go. And, Monet, when you wake up in the morning, what is it like for you?
like I haven't slept.
Like I haven't slept.
Which is, I actually do have some sleep apnea, so
Okay.
that complicates this.
Well, it's just another part of the pattern. Okay? So let's put our attention first on Cheryl, if we may. So I want you to kind of go back to this whole process of your sleep, right? How do you know it's time to wake up? What's the signal that...
My phone goes off and says, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Okay. All right, let me jot some of this down. Now, this is like you have an alarm on your cell phone? So the cue that initiates this strategy, right? The cue is what? Right? Okay, and what is that?
Auditory.
Auditory, right? So it's actually auditory digital. It's spoken words saying, wake up, wake up, wake up.
But you don't wake up sometime before it? Because I do have the same, but I just come, I
wake up a lot before.
Yeah, before the thing.
Okay, we'll track on this one first, and then we'll explore the one where she wakes up before the phone. So the phone says, wake up, wake up, wake up. Then what do you do?
I get out of bed, take a shower, get dressed, and go.
And this is when you're eliciting strategies, right? Because particularly if it's an effective and streamlined strategy and works, it is generally really out of awareness, out of consciousness. So you get this quick report, oh, I hear it, get up, and I'm gone. Right? But there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on in there between hearing it and actually getting out the door. All right? So so what I'd like you to do is slow it down a bit. Right, there you are, and you're in this kind of altered state. You're asleep, and you hear. All right, and then the next thing that you're aware of doing is what?
I turn it off.
Okay, so you reach over.
Well, I sleep with it under my pillow.
Okay, so it's under your pillow. So you reach under it. All right, so you reach down and get it. All right, so there's a little kinesthetic move there. You turn it off, and then
I get up.
All right. Nothing else happens.
With your eyes open or closed, you turn off the alarm.
Open. I'm awake.
So you open up and turn off the alarm.
Okay. So your eyes open as soon as you hear it, and are you aware of the room? All right. So you hear it, and it's a signal to go. It's like a visual external, right? Eyes open in the outside world. Then there's kind of a small chunk here. There's a kinesthetic move, right? The arm goes around under the pillow and shuts it off. All right? And you've got it shut off. Your eyes are open. All right? I want you to be in that moment right after you've shut it off. And then what happens?
I run my agenda.
You run your agenda. And how do you run your agenda? So, check it out. We've got a really clean auditory digital access, right? And this is one of the reasons we explored eye accessing cues yesterday, because they're going to be an inroad into strategies that may be out of the person's conscious awareness.
I missed it. What?
She said she runs her agenda and her eyes, boom, go down to auditory and they boom. All right. So when you say you run your agenda, how specifically do you do that?
How specifically?
When you're running your agenda, what do you do?
I have a list.
Okay.
I'm a list person.
All right.
So I have a list made up. And sometimes I think I make it during my sleep because I just wake up knowing what I have to do today.
Okay. Now, again, it's like I wake up knowing what I have to do. There's there's more in there at a sort of a deeper level than just waking up and knowing what to do. So again, you need to slow it down. You say you have a list, right? Is this how do you know you have a list?
I just start moving through it.
Okay, and what is it that you're moving through? I mean, do you see, hear, or feel something?
I see my list.
Great. Now, when you're eliciting strategies, you want to be sort of artfully vague, right? You want to give them an option. You don't want to install a strategy. You want to elicit a strategy. So if I were to have said, well, what do you see? What does the list look like? What does that presuppose? That it's a visual, that she's looking at it. That may or may not be the case, but if I say it, then I kind of create that in her mind. So I want to be really kind of vague about any elicitation. I want to find out what she does. So I give her a smorgasbord. Do you see something, feel something, hear something? So you have a visual representation. You kind of see the list.
I see the list.
All right. So when you look at the list, what is it that you see?
1 through 20.
1 through 20. Okay.
Literally.
Only 20.
All right. Now this is a list that you've already prepared. So
sometimes it's habit. you know, things I do every day, and then it gets into the things that I have to accomplish today.
Okay.
Or at the bottom of the list, it may be things I need to start today and finish tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you this, and I'm kind of filtering here. I want you to. Is this a list that you kind of refer to as it's a pre-existing list, and it's a checklist, or do you create it as you wake up and put things on the list? Or a combination? So just be there and, you know.
It's already there.
It's already there.
Written list? It's written in my head.
Okay. Now, the reason I'm asking this is a fine point, but it could be worthwhile. I wanted to find out whether it's a visual remembered access, or visual construct, or a combination of the two. Right? And as she checks it out, she says it's already there. Right? So, tentatively, we'll put down that it's a visual remembered. Now she visually sees this remembered list. You look at the list, and then what do you do?
I start checking them off.
Okay, and when you say you start checking them off, what leads you to put a check mark by an item? Why do you put a check mark by an item?
I completed that.
Okay, so these are things that you may need to do and other things you may already have done. Or,
No, I start at the top of the list. Get the kids out, fix the breakfast, get them out the door.
Right. So it's like a plan for the day. It's a future pace.
Right.
Right? And are there any variations in this? Do you always start at the top and work down, or?
I start at the top and work down.
Okay. Things to do. And what else happens? Let's say that there's the list, and you just say 20 items.
Sometimes
more or less. Okay. So I asked that, she looks up to the left, right? You get that quick visual remembered access as she looks at the list. So let's, in this case, say there's around 20 items. You start at the top, and you're checking them off, right? As you're checking them off, is there anything else going on inside you?
Well, I'm kind of looking towards the bottom of the list to make sure I'm going to have time to reach it.
Okay.
And what pace I need to click all these other things off so I make sure I get there.
Okay. All right. So you want to make sure you can complete the list to get to the bottom of the list.
Right.
All right. And what happens when you get to the bottom of the list?
I go to sleep.
What happens if you don't get to the bottom of the list?
I do.
You do. All right. And so this is something that you're kind of rehearsing before you rise. Is that right?
Rehearsing?
Well, I'm saying let me backtrack what we've got so far. We've got the phone goes off and says, get up, get up, get up. Then your eyes open and you look at the outside world.
Right.
Or, you're in the room. And then there's a little kinesthetic movement as you reach behind to shut off the phone.
Right.
And then you kind of review the list. You check out the list. There may be like 20 items on it. You kind of sequence it. You go through and you put check marks by them.
Right.
Like, what's coming up? This needs to be done.
Well, they actually disappear.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
In the morning, just get shorter. The list just gets shorter and shorter.
Shorter and shorter. And what goes on inside you as it gets shorter? What's the difference between a really full list and one that's only got a couple items as they disappear? Any difference?
Well, the bottom of the list is the things I want to do. So the quicker I get through the things I have to do, I get to the things I want to do.
Okay, and what's the difference? What's the difference between things internally, between the things that you've got to do and the things that you want to do? How come you want to get to the bottom of the list?
Oh, that's my time.
Yeah, now, if you're watching her hand gestures, where are they? There's that in the kinesthetic. And then Dennis report, well, it's my time. So I'm kind of forming a theory here that there's a kinesthetic good feeling as the have-tos kind of disappear.
Right.
Is that...
Right. The fun stuff's at the bottom.
All right. So actually it's a little strategy here that there's a kind of a kinesthetic if it's a full list when you're just starting. Does that feel different than a list where everything's disappeared but the things you want to do?
Does it feel different?
Yeah. When you have a full list of all kinds of things with no check marks and they're all there. Just be aware of how you feel. Just to see a full list.
Well, a full list, I guess, makes me feel more energized.
Okay.
I start to slow down as the list gets smaller.
Okay, and when you say slow down, what is that like internally? When it's a full list, we understand energized. Okay.
Slow down.
Okay.
I mean, I
Slow down.
physically move slower.
Okay. Great.
I'm slowed down.
Okay. All right. So this is a loop in the strategy here. Right? This is a loop in the strategy. The first time she sees the list and there's 20 items, there's a kinesthetic that's energized. So we could say some pluses here or something. And then she cycles back around and one of these kind of disappears. Right? And there's this sense of slowing down. Each time she cycles back, looks at the list, right? Makes a check mark, it disappears from here. This feeling changes, right? Becomes more slowed down until she cycles through it to where she hits the final one on the bottom of the list. And then what happens?
When everything's off the list, I usually go to sleep.
Okay. Now, I want to be clear about this. This is, when you're reviewing this list, right, and the things to do for the day, where are you in space? I mean, physically, where are you?
Where am I? I'm here. I'm getting in the shower. I'm here in the moment.
Okay. So when you say at the end you go to sleep, you go back to bed or what?
Yeah, my day's finished.
So you
I got
actually.
through my list.
So.
It's usually 3 a.m. I go to bed.
Does it expand?
Say again?
I'm curious if the list expands during the day.
Yeah, hang on. This list, as I understand, let me backtrack because I'm not sure I've got the sequence here. The list is something you do like as you're waking up. Right?
It's there when I wake up.
It's there when you wake up. Okay, and then the checking off of the things, is this something when you actually go through the world and you do them and check them off?
Right.
Okay, so you wake up and you see 20 items on the list and you feel energized.
Right.
Right? Because you know that there are these things to do, and then at the end, they're your time, etc. And then your day is a sequence of disappearing or checking things off the list. And that occupies the entire day.
Right.
Okay, so this is what I was confused about. Whether this is a real-time activity or something that she was doing in her head. So it actually gets her out of bed. This little strategy here is what she does during the day. It's not so much about, this isn't so much about getting up. This visual remembered of the list, right, gives rise to this kinesthetic, right, energy.
Where's the audio digital there? Is that her reading the list off?
This one is the phone ring, right? And you can, if you wanted to, kind of codify it even.
I think the first time she mentioned the list, her eyes went to audio digital.
Right, and that was, so as you're looking at the list, are you reading off the list? Kind of, I mean, right. So we could put a little auditory digital in here. It's like she's looking at the list when she's reading, right? And then she looks at it, she reads it, she sees the 20 things. That as she sees those, that gives rise to a kinesthetic feeling of energy.
Right.
Right? And then that's the thing that basically gets your feet on the floor out of the bed. And then you start checking these off in real time. Right?
Question.
Yeah.
Remembering the happy face yesterday, audio digital, said words or spoken words or written.
Written. It's like when you're reading them.
So not necessarily visually remembered.
Well, actually, it's two, right? Let me go through the sequence we got so far. Phone rings, her eyes open, she goes external. Then she visually remembers this list, so she's seeing a list. Then there's this little thing where she's reading off the list. And as she reads it off, and it comes up to 20, as she's reading it, kind of amps up this feeling of energy when it hits 20. And that energy of these things to do during the day, as she's reviewing this list, right, gets her out of bed. What if there are only 2 things on the list?
There's never 2 things.
Interesting.
I have 4 kids.
Well, that explains it.
Uh-huh.
That'll get you out of bed
And
every morning.
business
Right. Okay. All right. So are there ever any variations in this? Do you ever like roll over and sleep late and forget about it, or?
Sleep late.
Just another one. Okay, great.
I mean, there's been a couple of times.
Is it happens sometimes that when you wake up and you see your list, you know that today is going to happen something that will tremendously expand your list?
Oh, sure.
And how do you deal with that? Because that makes me sometimes terrified. And I don't want to wake up at all.
I just want to prepare here. So like if something comes up in the middle of the day,
Yeah, because
and I know
know
it's going to be there.
Yeah, because I know in the middle of the day my list can spend up to the 40 points.
Right,
I
well,
don't
then I know that it's going to take off from the bottom of the list.
How are you doing that?
Well, I'm not going to have my time down here, so anything I wanted to do disappears.
So you keep a space
And the
open.
have to list expands.
Okay, so when you wake up and see your list, you have some space there for unexpected events. Do you?
No, just the fun things drop off if unexpected have-to things come up.
Right. Now let's be clear about also the kinds of questions we're asking. Right. Originally, our intent was to elicit a strategy for waking up. Right. And the question that Maya just asked is a good question. Right. But it's not about a strategy for waking up. It's more like a motivation or adjustment kind of strategy sometime during the course of the day. And what I'm saying is everything that you do during the course of the day, behind it is an unconscious or an embedded strategy. So we've got her out of bed.
I think we got it.
Right? We've got her out of bed, and this would definitely work. Is that?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
you try it on for yourself. There's a logic to it, and it makes sense. Now we could take her day. We could take each item on that list and determine the strategy. Right? We could elicit the strategy for the decision that she makes for what to wear. And it's going to have a string of auditory, visual, kinesthetic sequence that, that she chooses what to wear, and what to cook for breakfast, and how to dress the kids, and all of those items on the list is going to have a little strategy underneath it, right? So what I'm saying is that strategies are kind of this deep substrata of everything you do, and they're primarily unconscious. You very seldom start even thinking about your strategies of how you do something, unless they kind of break down and they don't quite work as well as you want, and then you kind of begin to explore it. So what we're going to do is investigate ways to do that very specifically. Michelle.
Right after the VR, you only have the K.
I have a little auditory digital right here. That's when she's reading the list.
Okay, so that's when she's reading the list? Well, let's assume that the list contains going to work, or preparing a meal, or
And it might, right?
diabetic preparing multiple things every morning.
Sure.
You've also got a lot of things in there that have to rely upon the I guess VR or the VC. So I don't know if it's quite as simple as just that little simple.
For Cheryl, it seems to be. Right?
That's what works for me.
That's what works for her. For you, it may not be the same strategy, or you may have other pieces in there. Does that make sense?
When you zip through your list, do you see an image of stuff that you're doing when you read it?
I'm a notorious multitasker, so I can do like numbers 1 through 6 at the same time.
That's a mother of
Okay, so let's put a little bookmark in this. Are we in agreement that we have a pretty good working model of how she gets up, which was our intention in the first place? All right? Before we ask any questions, let's get a counterexample to this from Monet, who says, well, that's not the way I work. So what happens for you in the morning, Monet? Sleep and then what? Eyes go up to the left, a quick visual remembered access. Okay, we've got that.
Most typically when I wake up, it's a slow process. I'm in that twilight state for a long time. That's where I get a lot of vivid dream images and things like that.
Okay, I get a lot of dream images. So we've got a little process here already. We've got some hand gestures and some things that fill in the blank. What's in those hand gestures, right? First, let's backtrack it to the very first component of the strategy. How do you know when it's time to get up?
I will either wake up or I'll have an alarm set. And if I have an alarm set, usually I'll wake up right before the alarm goes off.
Okay. All right. So is this just what is it that you're aware of at this interface between sleep and wake?
It's just a very groggy area. I feel like I've been drugged.
Okay.
I wake up and I just feel like, okay, I'm starting to come out, but everything else is still in hibernation.
All right. So what kind of information are we getting? What rep system is she using to describe this? Kinesthetic. I get this feeling, I'm groggy, right? So there's this sort of body awareness of I'm no longer asleep and I'm in my body and there's this feeling of kind of grogginess, right? And then?
I wait until enough of the grogginess passes so that I have enough energy to get up.
Okay, and so how do you know the grogginess is passing?
It gradually starts to lift.
Okay. All right, so for Monet's, it starts off with a kinesthetic, and it's kind of is this a pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling? You like it, you don't like it, it's groggy. Some people love groggy.
When you have a day filled with things you need to do, it's not a pleasant thing because you feel like it's holding you back from getting started.
Okay, how about a day when you got nothing planned?
Then it's okay.
Then it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Does it make any difference in terms of your motivation to get out of bed of whether you got a lot planned or you don't got a lot planned?
I don't. I like to get my day started quickly enough to feel like I can make a lot of use of the time.
Okay.
So I'm generally speaking, I'm more of a night person.
Okay.
So it's like about the time people are most getting off work. It's 5 o'clock. It's like from 5 to 3. I'm probably my most productive.
Okay.
But in order to maintain harmony in the house, I tend to go to sleep when my husband goes to sleep, which might not be normally when I would want to. So then when I start waking up in the morning, it's just...
Okay. So there's this kinesthetic and this grogginess, right? And is it just the passage of time that kind of dissipates this, or do you do anything inside to shift the grogginess when you first wake up, or how does that change from groggy to something else?
I would say on an average day, it takes several hours to come fully to a waking state.
Okay.
That's usually why I don't eat a lot of breakfast, because that would just weigh me down that much more.
Great. So let's look at that kind of waking period. What's going on during that waking period?
You mean activity-wise?
Inside. You're laying in bed and you're groggy.
Oh, well, I'm not in bed for several hours.
Oh.
I get up and I'm doing what I need to do, but I'm moving very slowly.
All right. What gets you out of bed?
It's kind of slow motion.
Okay, I want to slow it down a little bit more. You're asleep, and then you become aware of your body, right? And that's the first thing that you're aware of is, I'm in my body and I'm feeling just a little groggy. Then what do you do?
Well, honestly, the first thing that gets me out of bed is needing to go to the restroom.
Great.
So
Great.
That's a great motivation.
Great. So this kinesthetic has got another kinesthetic called, time to pee. Secret NLP code. So all right. Biological. All right. So you get up, you do that, and then what do you do? Are you off and running? Do you go back to bed? Do you look for? What happens?
It depends on what time I've actually waked up.
Okay.
If I wake up, because I don't always wake up at the same time. If I've waked up at about, because it can be arranged, and if it's really early and I don't need to get up to make breakfast yet, then I may go back to bed just to be together for a while. Or if it's closer to when I need to start doing something, then I'll just stay out of bed and start doing things.
Okay. All right. So let's choose the one where you do have some things to do, because that's sort of a closer match to Cheryl's, I think, so we can compare them. So as you're going to the bathroom, is anything going on? Is it just nothing but that kinesthetic, and then when that's complete.
I'm not thinking about chores yet or anything like that.
Okay, so the little word in there is yet, so I know somewhere in the strategy that does occur, I just don't know when. So you complete the task in the bathroom, and then what goes on? How's the body? Is it changed? And besides that pressure kind of thing, I mean, the grogginess, is that any different?
Not really. It just takes a while.
Okay, and again, is there anything that you do to, are you aware of doing anything to affect the grogginess, or is it the passage of time?
Well, usually I'll then go out in the kitchen and make tea or start making breakfast. And I do find that one of the things that helps distract me from the grogginess is turning on the television, the noises.
All right. So it's kind of like the grogginess stuff here is still there, and in it there's this sort of time passage. As time passes, you get less groggy, just sort of naturally.
Right.
And often a component of the strategy to really awaken is that you go here and you've got some visual external and auditory external from the TV input. And that affects the kinesthetic by making it even less. Okay? And then, so say you've turned on the TV and you've got that sound and the pictures or whatever, and that affects the grogginess?
I think it...
Or affects the way you feel?
I think it does help some. I mean, the grogginess still takes its natural course to wear off, but it helps to distract me, and it gives me something else to focus on as it's lifting.
Okay. And then...
And I do have my lists.
Okay, and then you'd like to move on to a list?
My lists are written down. I've got several, but I don't generally go through them in the morning when I wake up in the same way that you do. It's like I'll get up, and then when I go out, then I'll kind of look at how I planned out.
Okay. At what point do you have a sense of being fully awake and in the day?
It's just a matter of time. It's honestly, it's like watching a sunrise. It doesn't. There it is. It's just a gradual awakening.
And there are certain things you may do in the middle of that to kind of, not so much to wake yourself up more quickly or more efficiently or anything. It's something to distract you from the process.
Right. I just have to keep moving. The more I do, the easier it is to feel really alive and awake.
Okay, great. So one of the things that you do is you may turn on the TV and listen to TV, and another sort of action that you may do is, begin to move around the house, right? Just and see things, do things, right? So this is really interesting. The primary component of Monet's strategy is this. It's very much represented kinesthetically, right? There is a corollary strategy, right, that isn't a wake-up strategy. It's a distraction strategy. It's a strategy to take her awareness away from this process, right? So she turns on the TV. She bustles around the house. It's linked to this, but it doesn't have anything to do with waking up. The way that she's described it so far, it's primarily a function of this, right? Which is interesting.
What does that stand for?
Time. Time is what allows the grogginess to kind of wear off, the body readjusts. And to be in that state with nothing but that inner awareness is not something that she chooses or prefers to do, so she has a corollary strategy of distraction. And this is literally, it's a strategy for distraction. There may be things that need to be done, cook breakfast or whatever, but it also takes her awareness away from the process of waking up. Right? So it's kind of like in a sense, almost out of her control. Right? So if you compare these two, it's really interesting. Right? You got a whole bunch of kinesthetic here, and kind of the prime motivating criteria, right, is time. And there's this little distraction, addition that comes up here, which is very different from Cheryl's. Here's the alarm, opens her eyes, boom, there's the list, right? So she did it, and really she sees the list, and as it mounts up to 20, every time she kind of sees that list running down, and it comes up to around 20 of them, this kinesthetic is amping up. It's this excitement, or what was the word? Yeah, this energy is pumping up, right? And that energy reaches a threshold and boom. So she has a sort of a proactive internal strategy with this list that each item that pops up on the list boosts this kinesthetic up to a threshold where it's boom. And it's pretty consistent because she has very few counterexamples with 4 kids of there's only one thing in the list, so I think I'll stay in bed. It's like, that's not it's the other end of the scale that may be the issue. Yeah.
Where do beliefs come in? Because the list,
Right.
I sort of do a similar
Right.
process, because I wake up and I'm gone too. It's kind of like, I need to do this, I need to get, I need to get this done.
Right.
I mean, but if you don't have that belief, let's say she pops a list
Right.
up, how do you integrate a belief? that
Well, and
gives
this
it
is,
priority?
rather than beliefs, what I'd like to kind of shift is to the word criteria, right? The criteria are generally somewhere at the beginning of the strategy. In other words, it's what the whole strategy is for. And you get those criteria by saying, why the hell get out of bed anyway? Why bother? I mean, seriously, for you, why do you get out of bed?
Out of fear that I won't get those things done.
Right? And if you, I got you. If you accomplish those things, what kinds of things are you accomplishing?
It's what makes my world go round.
So, like, what kinds of things? I mean, what's valuable about doing those things? What does doing those things get for you?
It gets my kids to school, it gets money in the bank, it gets...
Right, so you're getting criteria here. I'm taking care of the kids, money's going into the bank, right? So these criteria are established up front, and this strategy, right, is not only to kind of wake up, but it's to serve or satisfy the criteria, right? So, you have a model here for a different way to go about it, and there's other models in the room for waking up, right? One of the key pieces, I think, to Cheryl's is that she has it's almost an opposite kinesthetic here. Yours starts off with a bunch of these, and then time kind of removes them to the point where finally somewhere down the road it's like, no, I'm awake, it's okay. She has a different strategy in here, right, that adds energy to it. So at each little recursion through this strategy, there's more and more of a sense of energy boosting up. So this might give you some, if you wanted to try something like this on, some inroad into how to maybe adjust yours, right, with anchoring, with rehearsal, with things that are important, kind of new behavior generators or whatever, to begin to put something in the strategy here that by reference to it gave you a positive kinesthetic. I mean, really, grogginess is simply a state. There's a lot of ways to change state. Sometimes the sun really does go boink, right? I mean, you leap into a pool of cold, ice-cold water first thing in the morning, and suddenly the grogginess. I mean, and I'm not suggesting you do that, but you might want to start thinking, along the lines of this strategy about rehearsing a kind of thing of, you can have a plan or almost a list and anchor in the feeling of satisfaction or happiness, right, that may occur when these things are accomplished, as long as they're in alignment with your criteria, what's important to you, right, and begin to build those good feelings in as you review the day to accelerate this whole process, to kind of make it a bit more proactive so it's not so dependent simply on the environment or time. It may be dependent more on something that you're doing inside, right, to generate that feeling of awake and energy. Does that give you some insight into how to maybe go about that?
Well, I can see different things I could try. I mean, I do think some people are just night people and some people are day people.
Right, now here's a belief.
Yeah.
This is not a criteria, this is a belief. I'm just a night person, that's the way my metabolism is, and that's the way that... Now, beliefs are powerful things, because if the belief is firmly entrenched, right, and she thinks it's, beliefs are structures of maps of reality. They're not true, they're not false. They can be based on experience or self-awareness or whatever, but it still can be just beliefs. But if the belief is I'm a night person and a slow starter, then an attempt to change a strategy, what do you think?
You have to change your belief.
It's kind of trying to push the river back upstream. right? So, if this were really an issue, and she really did want to change this, then it may really be appropriate to begin to work with the belief too, and build in some flexibility around the belief of I can be a night person if I choose to, and there are other times I might choose to be something else, and begin to explore that. Once that kind of belief or generalization begins to shift, then you can move down more into a specific kind of map across for strategies. Right? And again, it's all, this has just been kind of an elicitation so that you all begin to get an awareness that from the simplest act of cooking breakfast to getting out of bed to choosing which car to buy, which college to go to, which boyfriend or girlfriend to finally marry, a decision strategy. Everything in life has this sequence of internal and external representations to produce an outcome, right?
I've tried, to not set my alarm on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I still wake up at the same time. And I'll lay there trying to make myself not get up or go back to sleep.
Right.
And I run through my mind saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I'm not going to get
That is not a strategy for relaxation.
I'm not going to get this done, I'm not going to get that done, I'm not going to get that.
Right.
And so it is a totally unrelaxed state. I am a nervous wreck if I try to stay there and not get up.
Right.
I have to get up.
Right.
Do you do any part of your list the night before?
I
Or is
do.
it all
I
next
go.
morning?
Kid stuff and early work stuff is before 3, and from 3 until I go to bed, 2 or 3.
No, I mean, when you're going to bed at night, you were saying you wake up and it's like the list was made while you were asleep.
Right.
Do you have a list that you're
Do you mean,
creating
do I physically
before you
make
go
the
to bed
list?
the night before, or is it all something that's created while you're sleeping?
Each next day's list is created probably the previous day. Because I'll get a phone call and I'll deal with tomorrow, so that goes on the list for tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, because that was the main difference I was thinking was maybe just the way I make my lists, and I have them all in a different part of the house, and I do them the day before, if not the week before, because there's all these projects that have to be completed. That maybe I'm sort of dissociating from that list.
Or it's kind of like it sounds on most of your strategies, the list is complete so I can go to sleep. Right? And then you wake up during the day and the list accumulates and you satisfy it. And Cheryl, in a sense, is future pacing the list for tomorrow. Right? Which, that could be an interesting strategy for you. Yeah. Neat. And I see this makes a difference here. You're watching congruence. She's exploring what other ways could I do it. And this one seems to have a little bit more resonance than just a direct map across and like that.
Well, I think that motivates me to get up.
Yeah.
Without the list.
Yeah.
If I didn't do
There
my
it
list
is,
today-
right there. Sure.
Yeah, if I didn't do my
Motivates you to
list
get up.
today for tomorrow.
Somebody snuck into your dreams and took your list, you wouldn't know what to do.
Well, I said the list is complete and it's in another part of the house, so maybe I just don't want to get up.
Right. That's I don't want to deal with that. Right. Well, insight. Okay. Thank you for letting us watch you decide to wake up or not. All right. Let me read the definition here once again of what a strategy is. We did this briefly yesterday. A strategy is a sequence of internal, right? We got internal, right, and external. Right? This auditory, first one's external, this is external, this is internal, these are internal. A sequence of internal and external representations that leads to a particular outcome. In this case, our little exploration here, the outcome was, getting out of bed and waking up. The way in which we divide experience into separate strategies, right, is somewhat arbitrary. However, it's useful to divide strategies into 3 major categories. So if you think about all the things you do in life, right, as a real big generalization, they kind of chunk out into the fields of decision, motivation, and learning. That makes sense? I mean, just think even of small things that you do, choosing what you're going to wear that day. That's a decision strategy, right? And what to do next is can either be a decision strategy, then you need a motivation strategy to get you to accomplish the decision, and then learning strategies are how you bring news of difference to the whole thing. So those are the big chunks about strategies. But sometimes it's useful to think in terms of strategies for specific skills, like contextually bound. Like a strategy for memory, a strategy for remembering names, spelling, creativity, flexibility, skiing, writing, all the activity kind of context of life can contain specific strategies. Right? If you watch any of the sports channels on the weekend or the golf channel, the whole thing is about strategies for playing golf. Right? How to move your body, how to imagine the ball going, et cetera, et cetera. So with this as preamble, what I think that I'd like to do is have us play with decision-making strategies. Right? And let's think about a simple decision, one that we often use, and it's going to come up here before too long. Let's say that today or tomorrow or the next day you're going to go out to a restaurant, right? And so my question is, you go to a restaurant, how do you decide what to order? Right? You get a menu, and, there's all kinds of, you might have pictures of the food, but I want you to think about that. When you go to a restaurant, how do you decide? How do you make a decision on what to tell the waitress for your order?
What I like food, type of food. And if I like chicken, I will ask for chicken. If I like fish, how hungry you are.
All right, so we got criteria coming up. How hungry, what you want. Yeah.
I do sort of a cost-benefit analysis. Well, I check the prices, but if I really want something, I might let myself have it even if it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's several, and I'll kind of also go by nutrition, so it kind of depends. If I really want something, I'll probably just get it. But if I don't want it that much, I'll go by the thing that's the most nutritional or the thing that costs least amount of money. Okay. And it's usually how much I want it, how much nutrition it has, how much money it costs.
All right, list those again. You say how much I want it.
But if I feel I've had too much junk, then I won't, even if I want it a lot. So it kind of depends on where I am.
All right. So the other was nutrition.
Nutrition. And how much it costs.
And cost. Okay. So these are criteria, right? These are the criteria that she's. The menu's there with all the options, but they're going to at some point be compared to this criteria, right? Do you have an easy time or a difficult time making choices in restaurants?
It just depends. If something just leaps out at me, then it's easy. But there are times I will be sort of, I don't know.
So now you hear this, you got to start tuning into spoken word to begin to kind of detect these submodality or these representational words. She says, if something just leaps out at me, right? So what do you suppose that is? Probably a visual. Oh wow, that big, bright, right? But other times she says, well, I don't know, and just maybe I'd want this, maybe I don't want this, and you kind of go back and forth and tell yourself you might not. So there can be this auditory back and forth thing. You kind of begin to pick that up just watching the eye accessing cues, listening to their process words, and then you begin to elicit the specific strategy. Who feels as if they have a really lousy strategy for ordering, has a hard time finally getting a Yeah. Only until noon. Just ordering breakfast.
I think it's a good strategy, but it can make it take longer for me to get through and then it annoys people. But what I'm doing is reading the menu because I'm tasting the food, reading all the descriptions. So I go through until one tastes really good.
Okay, now do you feel as if you make good decisions? Okay, it's simply that it takes a while. Right? So you get the menu, right? Then what do? You read down the menu and
as I'm going through, I'm remembering what each of these items in my memory tastes like.
Right.
Does Jenna, is he a quick orderer?
It's a little quicker. I mean, it doesn't take me a half an hour, but usually what I'll have to do is a lot of people like to talk by looking at the menu, and I'll just say, I just need a minute to look at the menu, and then because I can't taste these things and talk to things.
All right, so let me just kind of jot down this little strategy. So, Monet, how do you know, you're at a restaurant, how do you know it's time to order? How do you know to initiate the I want to choose strategy?
When the waiter comes in.
Okay, the waiter comes up and says, can I take your order? Right? So we've got an auditory external, right? May I take your order? Then what do you do?
If I have questions, I have questions, otherwise I just order.
This is what happens when you go for strategies, right? She just said it takes her a long time. She sees things, she tastes it. Now I ask the questions as well. I just order.
She has to pick the menu
Right.
up first before the guy comes.
Yeah, you make it.
This is when you're actually voicing the decision that you have made when they say, what would you like to order? This is the end of the strategy. This is the exit. What we want is everything before there. All right?
I read it and I can taste it.
Okay, so you read the menu, right? And it says, what might it say?
Huevos rancheros.
Then what do? You've just got... You see how quick it goes? You see how quick it goes if you're watching her, right? So she goes... She goes visual external. She's looking at the menu, right? And then there's an auditory internal, right? She reads the menu, right? So you see it written, you read Huevos Rancheros, then what do you do?
Then I sense the taste of
Okay. How do you know you're sensing a taste of Huevos Rancheros versus enchiladas? She eye accessing cue?
Yeah.
Right? Boom, she goes up visual.
it? Yeah. I'm comparing it to the other Huevos rancheros.
How are you comparing it?
The taste. I'm remembering the taste of previous breakfasts that were the same.
Okay. So just off this written word, you're suddenly tasting these written words?
So they're at a disadvantage if it was really bad the last time I had it.
I want to go back to this thing of you're reading the menu, it says, you're looking at the menu, it says, Huevos Rancheros.
Eggs, refried beans, and cheese, and each, in my mind, each one of
All right, so now are you reading this on the menu? Eggs, refried beans, cheese, right? Are you doing anything else?
I'm starting to salivate.
No, and I want you to check this out. It may be there, it may not be there, right? I'm watching your eyes and they're doing some visual accessing. Do you have some kind of visual representation of what Huevos Rancheros look like?
Yeah, I see the food too.
Oh, yeah. See, and this was totally out of her awareness. I was a little bit cautious in wanting to elicit it because she didn't volunteer it, so I offered it as non-committal as I could. And I wanted a congruent response if it was true. So she says, oh, yeah, I see that, right? So the next step in the strategy is you go auditory internal, you say Huevos Rancheros, and then you do a visual remembered image of what a Huevo Ranchero platter looks like. So you got the Huevos Rancheros, you're looking at them, and then what do you do? Okay, then there's this gustatory, right? And then you said at that point you're doing a comparison, right?
Does she remember visual, construct visual the image of the...
Well, I'm watching her eyes are going up and to the left, and I'm assuming that you've seen Huevos Rancheros before, so right? She's not making up what it looks like.
But if she hadn't had that dish before, she might.
Sure, some rare Oriental restaurant with Fuwa Bang Zhu, and I don't know. So we're coming close here now, Monet. You've got this gustatory of what this, what they say there in the menu, what you're reading, these Huevos Rancheros that you're imagining. You get a taste of what those might taste like, and then what do you do with that taste?
I either get a sensation of that would taste good right now or that wouldn't taste good.
Great. All right, so the gustatory taste goes to a comparison, a feeling of, this would taste good, this wouldn't taste good. So it's a kinesthetic plus or minus, right? And if you get the plus, that this feels good, then you would order it. So, I mean, if you could be at a restaurant and the very first thing you look at on that menu, if it feels good, that's it. And you don't even read the rest of the menu.
No, I just scan the rest of it.
Yeah, okay. And how do you do that? So it's never just like a one trial thing. First thing at the top of the list. That's what I want.
I go through. There's some I just know I wouldn't want, and so.
And how do you know that you wouldn't want them?
Because they're not things I generally eat, or
What is it?
I don't eat waffles, so I would just skip over waffles.
Okay, and when you imagine eating a waffle, you see waffle on the menu, what do? You see waffle, you make a picture of waffles.
I just get the sensation that it's too sweet. I don't want to go.
Okay, I get the sensation that it's too sweet. There's two things going on. It's kind of like this little thing. It pops to this kinesthetic negative real quick. Right? And again, it's a habit. If you've done it enough, it happens almost instantaneously. Waffles, taste too sweet, don't want. Boom, eliminated. Right, so you're scanning the menu, and you got Huevos Rancheros, and that's sort of a front runner so far, tastes good. Then what?
There may be several things that are in the running, and then
How do you know several things are in the running?
they each taste good.
They each taste good. All right, so if this isn't sufficient to carry her over the threshold to exit and say, I want Huevos Rancheros, she goes back, the pattern goes back, actually, all the way to here, right? And she looks at the menu again, and she goes, chalupas, right? Or what would you go, for example? What would be a runner-up for Huevos? Look at those eyes.
It depends on where I am.
Okay.
But sometimes it might even just be simple, something simple like oatmeal.
Okay. So oatmeal's a possibility. So and they've got that.
Depends on how.
Right. They got the right. Now, when she says it depends on, right, in a strategy, when you're eliciting a strategy, they say, well, it depends on. What they're referring to is criteria. She said at one point, it depends on where I am, right? So that's going to be a criteria up front. If I'm here, then that might happen. It may be another criteria of how hungry I am, right? Those are all things that occur. They're up here up front. So when she comes back to compare this, there's a quick reference to her criteria, right? Am I too full for that, or whatever, like that? Or is it, as in Dana's case, the referral to the criteria, they may have Huevos Rancheros and they're $150. Well, that doesn't meet the, So there's a criterial comparison that actually is going on all the time with choices. But then when it does meet the criteria, cost is right, it's not too heavy, those kinds of things, I'm in the right place to find this kind of food, then this strategy kicks off, right? And so let's say oatmeal is on this same menu, would it be the same kind of thing? In other words, you would see the menu, you would read oatmeal, get a quick little flash of what oatmeal looks like and get a taste of what that oatmeal would be for you right now, and it would give you a feeling of, good or not so good, right? All right? And if that one weren't quite so good, and you've compared it to the taste of Huevos, then what might you do?
If it were not as good, I would go with the one that had the best end result, and as I'm imagining it.
Okay. And on an average restaurant visit, what's your sense of how many comparisons do you need to make?
How many make the final cut?
Yeah.
Generally 2 or 3.
2 or 3? Because some people have a strategy that's maybe similar to this, but they have to read every item. And that can really take a long time. So you have a thing here for you to have a selection, a comparison of, say, 2 to 4 items, right? And then amongst that, how do you know it's sufficient? How do you know you have a sufficient sampling of things to choose from, even though there's more on the menu or whatever?
Breakfast menus are pretty simple, and you can usually just say nothing from that section.
Okay.
So you kind of hone in on what you found familiar and good before, and then select.
Great. So this is, in a sense, it's part of a decision strategy, and it's sort of like a learning strategy. She does some pre-selection up front. I don't want anything from this, I don't want anything from that, and it narrows down the stuff she actually has to decide on and run through this strategy. Right? Cool. And then when she does a comparison, right? Now, this kinesthetic plus or minus, my assumption is that this is a comparison to the previous samples. In other words, if you're running the oatmeal through, the feeling that you get after you taste it, this is the comparison to does it feel better or worse than the Huevos, right? And then you get 2 or 3 of those, right?
It's taste and feel.
Right, these are-
It's about how do you feel after you eat.
Great. These are almost what's called a synesthesia. These happen, this taste feel is real close in time. It's not just taste separate and then how do I feel about that? It happens almost spontaneously, right? And then you have enough of a sample, 3 or 4 of them, right? And then the one that has the biggest plus. So for example, huevos could have a big plus like this, waffles a little negative one, and that day for some reason the oatmeal comes up and it's a big one and then it's exit, right? Because it's met all the criteria up front about the breakfast you want, the price, the way you feel, etc., and what tastes good. So and it's an interesting thing, for you to enjoy what you've selected at a restaurant, it has to taste good, right? So taste is a criteria up front that she's also comparing to. This is actually, it's a pretty good strategy, right? It works, absolutely, yeah. There are other folks that get lost in loop sometimes. It doesn't work. Yeah.
I'm just curious, if you go for dinner restaurant, cost has no factor at all.
Oh, sure. If it's, but usually when you walk into a restaurant, you kind of know what their range is. And so, but there's this place in Gainesville, they sell hot dogs and they also sell Dom Perignon, so you're very rarely going to have that kind of contrast in one location. So sometimes you just don't even go in. Sometimes you don't even go into a restaurant because you know what their range.
Sure, but sometimes you get a $10 pasta and you can have a $24.95 steak and lobster or something too. So does that have any?
Well, sometimes when I'm evaluating that, I'm thinking, well, how much will I have left over that I can make a second meal out of tomorrow? And then it will be like what Dana's saying. Then it's worth it, the cost benefit, because I'm getting 2 meals out of it.
Right. Now, you understand this, though. These are all criterial considerations before the decision is even made, right? In other words, it's like you're going out to a restaurant, you get together with friends, and if it's Thursday night, you're going to be gone for an hour, no big deal, and you want to stay within a budget, and go to a place where there's a sampling that everybody can get pretty much what they want. That sorts from a whole bunch of restaurants in town to the ones around you. Location might be one. So there's all this kind of preamble that occurs way before you even look at the menu, right? It could be contrasted with it's somebody's wedding reception. You're taking them out for the special dinner. So suddenly the thing of cost, that criteria shifts. A different, bunch of restaurants light up. But then even within it, even within the restaurant, like you say, there could be the $10 pasta, the $24.95 steak, and the criteria of expense or cost is considered up front. So it's a sorting filter for the whole menu.
And that happens before you actually
Yeah,
get into the...
that's what she's saying. You look at certain sections, it's like, well, all the seafood on here is over $20, and I don't want to go that high, so I'm not even going to look at those. I won't even, why disappoint myself? Sure, it tastes good, but I'm not going to, right? But some people actually do disappoint themselves. God, I wish I could afford because they get the great taste of the mahi-mahi, and then they go, oh my God, $24.95. I can't buy that, but oh wow, look, lobster, $28. Oh, that tastes wonderful. Oh my God, $28. So depending on, if you don't sort your criteria out cleanly, a decision-making process can be really unpleasant, right? But if you have them sorted out cleanly and you stick to the criteria, it's generally pretty streamlined. And you're sorting by things that really kind of matter to you, like what's it taste like and does it fit my budget and like that. And you're satisfied with the decision that you've made. Yeah.
Could she overlay the strategy for wicking?
Possible. Let's discuss this after we do the exercise. We'll look at that. There's some definite possibilities here. Okay, this has been we've seen a couple of elicitations. We've seen waking up, and we've got Cheryl's and Monet's strategy for waking up, and this is a strategy for ordering in a restaurant from a menu, right? And we've hopefully made it clear enough that there's a difference between the actual decision-making process from the menu and the kind of background criteria that gets you there in that restaurant at that time with that menu. And that could have to do with location to the house, the cost, how hungry you are, whatever, right? But then when you're actually there ready to order, this is what we're after in this first little run through on strategies. So what I'm going to have you do is get together with, I think we'll do 2 rounds of this maybe before lunch. I'd like you to do this in groups of 3. I want there to be 2 people eliciting the strategy and 1 person, telling them how they go about making a decision. And just sort of for an experiment, this is a first run through. Let's limit the decision to being, how do you know what to get at a restaurant? How do you make a decision at a restaurant what to order? Right? So I want to be real clear. This is not a technique. There's no right way to do this. This is an exploration for you to use sensory acuity, track on eye-accessing cues, visual, auditory, kinesthetic words, to elicit from another a strategy that makes sense. Because once you got it, it should make sense. That this is a way that you could make a decision. And if it's a decision that turns out not to work so well or be a problem, the problem should also be obvious within the strategy that you've elicited. Just like, in a sense, Monet's waking up strategy, if it's out of her control and it's contingent to time, well, that would make sense. How it could be kind of a problem to kind of get rolling with it. And don't worry about the coding here. Basically, what you're going to have is a string of VAKOGs. And in restaurants, you may have some olfactory and gustatory like this one. So I just want you to use the standard letters and make whatever relevant notations you think are important. Like I'd put a little E up here. That's for visual external when she's seeing the menu. And this is the little I here is her own voice, auditory internal. This is when she remembers the way it's visual remembered, right? So however you want to make these notations, just so that it makes sense to you and you could kind of feed it back to someone else. Now, you know that you're successful when you can backtrack on the strategy with the person that you've been eliciting it from, and you get congruent agreement. Yeah, that's what I do. I look at the menu, and let's check it out with Monet. So what you do, Monet, you go into a restaurant, you look at the menu, right, and you read it. And something may come up like huevos rancheros, and you kind of an image of those huevos rancheros, and then you taste them. And you get the taste in your mouth so you know what it is. And then you get kind of a feeling of, is this what I want or not what I want? But there's another, you'd like to compare it to something else, right? So then you may look at the menu again and read oatmeal, get an image of that, then a taste of that oatmeal. And the oatmeal, the feeling, that kind of taste feeling is compared to the huevos. Which is better? Which is better? Well, I'm not quite sure if I want either one of these, so you might run another one through it. Right? Whatever it is, another food in the same kind of pattern. Do you have a comparison there? It's like, the huevos like that, the oatmeal's like that, and the other's like, huevos, I think. That feels the best, and then boom, you choose it. Is that the way it works? Okay? And what I'm doing is just backtrack what she gave me. I'm calibrating to congruence, agreement in her. So at any point I get confusion, or I'm not sure, whatever, I want to slow it down and find out what's going on for her. See if there's pieces that I perhaps missed. All right? Here's some kind of guidelines for elicitation. These are the kinds of things that you need to find out. First is, how do you know to begin deciding? Right? And this is, you're at the restaurant, you're holding the menu, right? Or your husband says, what do you want for dinner? Whatever the initial trigger is, right? And then you've got to have some method of generating alternatives, right? In this case, at a restaurant, generally, this is you read the menu, right? Some people have a different strategy. They kind of go into a restaurant, and rather than reading the menu first, they're sorting through remembered images of what they'd like to have. And then they're disappointed when they look at the menu and it's not there. Right? Others have done that before. All right, so this is generating alternatives. Now, the other component of this in Monet's strategy over here, generating alternatives. How do you generate alternatives? She generates alternatives by cycling it through the same strategy. Right? She sees the menu, she talks to herself, sees a picture, she runs it through the same strategy. And then she evaluates alternatives with this kinesthetic here. She evaluates the sort of taste feel between huevos and oatmeal. So the way that she's evaluating is through is kind of a gustatory kinesthetic feeling. This is the evaluation component. And she selects which alternative to take when she does a comparison and one has a bigger kinesthetic feel. Kinesthetic is often at the end of a strategy. Feels right, right? Sometimes it's linked with other things. Yeah.
Is that kind of backtrack also a reinforcement for that initial decision?
This?
Yeah. Going back
Well,
and to,
one of the,
for instance, and going, no, that doesn't take it.
Right.
Huevos really is a good.
It's going to depend on her initial kind of test. If her initial test in this run through, the huevos had a big old plus on the K, and then she runs oatmeal through it, and it's not as big, huevos is still the front runner. And then she runs something else through it, and if it still doesn't taste as good that moment in time, the huevos are going to win out. So that this little pattern generates the alternatives, right? This is the way she evaluates the alternatives. Which one? Well, this taste feel is strongest for this one. So she generates them with this strategy. Very specifically, she evaluates them with this. And then, when it reaches a sort of a crescendo here, a good enough feeling,
And
right?
the restaurant's closed.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm sorry, then, boom, she exits. Okay, so this is going to be exploration. All righty. Yes?
How would you throw cost in there? What?
Cost would be this is the other thing I want you to track on. Is what is it that has to be satisfied before you even begin deciding, right? And those are criteria. It has to be, you may have an internal figure, it's got to be under $15, right? So what that is a pre-selection criteria, right? That eliminates a bunch of stuff you don't even refer to, but it also has to be a match for this. Okay, so the huevos are under 15, so that's cool.
So
In other words,
it's not really thrown into.
it's not part of this, but it's standards by which you make the decision. In other words, you do not violate your criteria, right, when you make a good decision.
So you need to have your preset.
And we all do. And that would be another useful thing to elicit. And I want you to deal with, rather than some generalized, vague thing of ordering from a menu, pick a specific time, a very specific time, and put the person back in the experience at that restaurant at that time, rather than some generative or generic thing. And you find out then what their criteria were at that time. For them at that moment, it could have been, not being very hungry, and the cost, and it has to be close to the house, and it has to have a table big enough for 6 of my friends. Those are all criteria that come up front before this runs. But this is also compared to those, right? Yeah.
How do you evaluate alternative? We cannot put here the cost and nutrition value. I mean, and which basis we evaluate alternative?
Absolutely. Well, Dana has that as
So
kind of a...
then come else, I mean, why this should be coming better? So I can put it with the, how do you evaluate that?
It'll be however it is for you. And different people are going to structure it in different ways. All right? Now, what I want you to watch out for are endless strings of VAKs. Right? Because what happens is there are recursive loops. See, this pattern is repeated 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So I want you to watch that. If you start getting repetition, make a little loop back. So rather than going, when I was eliciting the strategy after this, rather than putting another VE and A and just running it on, I just made a little loop back here because it's a recursive strategy. Right? So if you notice a recursive loop where it's a visual kinesthetic comes up a couple times, just make a little thing like that because it means that it goes around in there. But be aware of how they get out of that loop. Some people don't. Some people get lost in a loop with no way to evaluate the alternatives.
They're still at the restaurant.
They're still at the restaurant. Well, I don't know. This would be great. Well, I might like to, and right? So this is a voyage of discovery. And what we're going to do is we're going to do one round before lunch in 20 minutes. And I want to see if we can all be back here at about 11:45 Tom Dotz has got some announcements about the DVDs and the filming that he'd like to share with you guys at 11:45. And so we'll go, get groups of 3. I want you to just go for it, see what you can duplicate. Tom will speak until noon. We'll get back here at 1:30, and then we'll have a discussion, see what we've got during the first round, tuning up our abilities, and then we'll get back into the second 2 rounds. All right? Get together.
It's page 10.